Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Cheaper Than Therapy. Vanessa and I are so excited for today's guest. And Rachelle, I got to tell you, you're one of those people, and this is what's so great about social media is that every once in a while you'll be fed a random reel from someone and be like, oh, and yours was one of those that I like stumbled upon it. And then I went down a rabbit hole of your content and I was like, I love this woman. She is brilliant. So first of all, love your work. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
And I want to talk to you about that specific clip that I found first, because I was just talking to Vanessa about it before you hopped on. But first, I'd love if you would just tell us a little bit about you and how you came into doing the work you're doing now.
Yeah, and I'm so glad I, listened to you guys and love you guys. So I know that I can, because I kind of have different versions for different people and what they're ready to hear. But I'm so glad that you guys, I can be so honest with you guys, and you're into the spiritual side of things. And
Mm,
I was a writer for years, then I wrote for comedians, and I had a good little life. And somebody said to me one day, if life is going the way that you want it to, or at least you like it, you're happy, you should ask the universe what you can do for it. And I was like,
mm,
oh, that's kind of a cool idea. Yeah, I'm pretty grateful. I'm pretty happy. No problem. And I remember in my town, exactly where I was driving, and I was just like, hey, universe, if you ever need anything from me, like, I'm here. I'm happy to help. And the universe was like, hold my beer. I got to talk to that bitch. And I just remember the sensation of like the car door opening and feeling like it just pulled me out. And that old me just kept going down that road. And like the new me, the universe has looked in the face and was like, let's do this, bitch. And it's the only time I ever have and still have not surrendered like this before. And just was like, oh yeah, what do you need? And then just led me on this sort of rabbit hole down what I do now that I never could have anticipated. And I just followed the breadcrumbs because I was so open to like, what do you need? What can I do?
Mhm.
And then, when usually I feel the need to control things, I feel the need to, have a goal, meet things. And I just sort of stumbled along and started with having this really deep need to help get better human sexuality into classrooms and also relationship education,
Mm,
which the Dutch teach, a beautiful model from 5 years old to 18 about what is relationship education. They teach you how to break up with somebody. They teach you, at 5 years old, what the butterflies are in your tummy when you sit next to one kid versus when you sit next to another kid and don't have it. Yeah, it is amazing. And so I wanted to bring that into school systems. I worked with a therapist who became a life coach while we worked together. And I was like, oh my God, why the hell would you become a life coach? Oh my God, you have like a real profession. What are you doing? Why would you do that? This is so embarrassing for you. But we stuck with it. And then one day she just came and fired me. And I said, I've never been fired for anything in my life. I'm doing a great job. And she said, I know, but I think you need to become a life coach.
mm,
And so I'm firing you because you are not living your life's purpose. And I told her she was crazy. Went to my therapist and was like, this bitch. You guess what she said? My therapist was like, I actually always thought the same thing. And I'm glad
mm,
somebody said it. So that just sorted me down the path. And then, schooling arrived and it's gone from there. And it's helped me to stay really open in my business and what things come to me and just think, oh, okay, is this right or is this not right? Because I'm so open to it and just like, yeah, that does feel right. No, that doesn't feel right. There's no other place in my life that I trust the universe at all. So, it's not like I globally am changed. Like I'm still controlling every other aspect of my life, but this has been a journey that I'm just, okay, in service of
Well,
where it
that's
takes.
it's interesting to hear you say that because I was actually going to ask you if you could tell us more about like have you always been interested in this like self-development landscape or was that something that came from that kind of moment of reckoning? Like what was your kind of I mean, we're therapists, we want to know it all, but like what was your
Yeah.
kind of like catalyst to even being like, "Oh, I'm interested in this," or do you find that you were kind of always?
Yeah, it wasn't always. My parents always joked that they weren't saving for college, they were saving for therapy. Which joke slash not joke.
Yep.
So they were lovely and they were really great they were really into mental health themselves. They went to therapy. They got us into therapy, my brother and I, when we were young, when we needed it. And that's always been a touchstone. And so
Mm.
that has always got me into thinking. And I've always championed therapy because as you guys know, therapy gets such a bad rap. But I've always been somebody who's championed therapy to other people and really gotten into psychology classes in college. And I'm just always that investigator of, yeah, but why do we do this? Yeah, but why do we do that? Yeah, but what's happening there?
I have to say for the listeners, you actually call yourself the fluffer for therapy, which I thought
Yes.
that just
Just
tickled
everything.
me so much.
Yeah. And I was like always careful how I can use that and not, but people are like, I get it. Wink,
Oh,
wink.
we get it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, but I feel that way. And it's one of the great things about being a life coach that I'm really proud of is that so many people come to me because they say, I will never go to therapy. I had a bad experience, or it scares me, but I'll go to a coach. And so, yeah, when I say I'm a fluffer, I get them ready. We start and then we build that rapport, show them what it is to work one-on-one, to trust somebody, maybe the most trusting relationship you've ever been in, to open up, what it is to explore feelings. I help clients to identify emotions. That's a big one. I love working with male clients. We don't give anybody language around emotions. We certainly don't give men. So like we start with, I don't know how I feel. Okay, where does it exist in your body? And so we go into the somatics of emotion, and then, often we'll dive deep enough to a point where I say, okay, so on your journey, this is as far as I can take you, like with my staff and my, big hat. And like, this is as far as I go on your journey. And then they're like, no, you can't leave me. And I'm like, I can, because therapy is just exactly, what we're doing with a different specialty. And you will be able to build that relationship with them as you have with me. And so moving them on to that feeling of like, oh, I understand what it's like now. I get it. I have trusted before. I can trust again, and then sort of move them on. And that's been so beautiful.
I love what you're saying so much. And I feel like I've never heard anyone speaking to what you're saying in the way that you are, Rachelle. And well, first of all, I love that at that point in your life, you were describing with your therapist firing you that you your coach firing you, that you had like a squad of people. I certainly have a squad of like a therapist, a mentor, a coach, like people that, I think we get different things from different relationships. And there's so much in more of like the clinical models of psychology that say like, no, you should be working with an analyst and you should be going a couple times a week. And that should be like what you're doing. And I think there's a way that what you're speaking to is not only an entryway to those who might be a little bit resistant to doing this type of work, but also a way of decolonizing some of these mental health ways of exploring what's happening for us. And I just think it's so important that we say different people come from different backgrounds and require different types of support. And I think we're living in a time where we're really starting to open up to that idea more.
Yeah. I was so excited when you guys asked me on this podcast, because I am somebody who surrounds myself with therapist friends. I tend to date therapists. Talk about cheaper than therapy, dating therapists. I don't recommend it, but keep learning that lesson over and over the hard way. But I get these great conversations with therapists about the difference between life coaching and therapy. And a lot of therapists, no, I'm not going to say a lot. Several therapists in my life are very supportive of life coaching, but a lot of therapists hate life coaches for very good reason. And one of the reasons I was so excited for us to get to have a discussion about the issues with life coaching, which I don't think we're talking enough about in society, and the really scary things that can come from an unregulated field, but also the really special and beautiful things that can come from life coaches versus therapists. And so I was really excited for us to have that discussion. And, I was really grateful that Psychology Today did a great article a while ago on, okay, therapists, I know everybody seems to hate life coaches, but if 80% of the work we do as therapists is about building that relationship, then why couldn't a life coach build that same relationship of trust and openness and vulnerability? So we need a place, I think, for both, especially because, as you guys understand, therapists are booked wonderfully. I mean, this is so great. But, I talk to my therapist friends and they're like, oh yeah, there's this patient, there's a person who's suicidal. I can't get them in because I have such a full load. Or this person is really struggling. I can't get them in because I have these other ones. And I see the place is that sort of the mental health being sort of moved into some life coaching, versus like mental illness versus, so we sort of triage. Oh, hey, are you looking at, I always say I deal with the, existential crisis. What's my purpose? Why am I here? What I have a value, religious issues, things like that. What I want to get out of life are really great things for a life coach. But then I send, OCD, eating disorders, severe depression. I start sending those things, trauma, to therapists. And if we can start sending those back and forth, I think we're going to get more people the help that they really need.
Couldn't agree more.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I'm someone listening to you and I'm thinking, how do I know what are some of the challenges I should look for in terms of a life coach, or um, not even just a life coach, but someone who is a person who would be good to work for? What do you think are some of the characteristics that can be challenging in really either capacity or either field?
Can you explain what you mean a little bit more by that?
Yeah, like let's say I'm like, yeah, what Rochelle's saying makes a ton of sense. Like, how do I know where to get started in
Ah,
finding a life
Finding
coach? And a
someone.
little bit the reason I say this is the reason I say either capacity is I love what you're saying. And I think what I've seen a lot of is, as much as I love that we're having more conversations and, talking about mental health and normalizing people with a background in therapy or coaching, being on social media and all of those things, what I am seeing is a lot of like what's happening for my ego and my ability to be a star is really sort of like what is the focus versus I don't know, like this call to do this work and be of support of people. And I know it's not black and white, and I know that, we're all complicated in that way, but I think that it can sometimes be challenging when it's like someone is a life coach, but they have like 500,000 followers on Instagram. And sometimes like I'll be like looking at some of the content and I'm like, and so I guess that's where my question is stemming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing is that we are not informing people enough about life coaches and life coaching. I know that I'll get clients that will interchangeably say to somebody, "Oh yeah, I'm seeing this wonderful therapist. Her name is Rachelle." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I am very clear that I am not a therapist. I am not your therapist. I'm a life coach." Those are very different, and that's really important to me. In my comments, if anybody says, "Oh, well, therapy," I'm like, "No, no, no, no. That's why it's Coach Rachelle Indra is my handle. I never want someone to think I'm a therapist because it's so important that we educate people on the difference." Though I will say, somebody once in my comments said that life coaches are Walmart therapists. And I loved that so much. I want that on my business card. I want that on my business. I don't have business cards, but when I get them, I'm putting that on my business card. That was like, thank you, sir. I will tattoo that on my soul. Thank you. That was amazing. Just so we know the difference, really. But I think that people need to do their research before choosing really a therapist or a life coach. I mean, I'm the first one. I tell my clients, if they choose to stay with me and go to therapy, there's a lot of horrible therapists out there.
Yeah.
I mean, horrible.
It's real.
And I'm the first one to call them out because they're so dangerous and hurting people. But I say, give that person, 3 opportunities, before you really decide they're not right for you and try somebody new. But I think people sort of blindly go to coaches without ever doing research. Did they go to schooling? Was it a weekend course?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they certified? The problem is life coaching is completely the wild, wild west. It's totally unregulated. Anybody can call themselves a life coach, which is so damaging. And we need licensing and we need schooling that they need to go to. I mean, it has to be credentialed. We need all the things that we need for therapists for life coaches. And I think sadly, a lot of people are attracted to life coaching because you could just hang your sign and say you are, and you can charge whatever you want, and you can do it from anywhere in the world. And, and you don't have the restrictions that therapists have. My business partner is going to school to be a therapist. And we're starting to notice, once she gets her license, what she can do in our business is going to change, which I also think we need to remodel therapy and what therapists are going through, because I'm starting to realize how narrow her field is going to be once she gets her license. And that's, unfortunately, we're having a lot of really great therapists leaving that profession to become coaches, which is, I mean, no shame in their game. I know a lot of wonderful ones and I see exactly why they do it. But if the therapist or the organization that's looking at therapists really wants to keep therapists, you got to change the game
Yeah,
because a
I
lot of
agree.
are leaving.
The problem is though, is that like it's state by state, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know other states, but I know in California, like our board is literally, have you ever seen that animated movie Zootopia? Did you ever watch
Yes.
that movie? Okay. Do you know the part where they go to the DMV and it's the
Yes. I
sloths
also
and
lived in
then
California and I know the DMV.
so
Yeah.
and they're sitting behind anybody who's if you have not watched this movie, that scene is like the fucking funniest thing. And they're like, it's sloths right in the DMV. That is what I picture whenever I picture the
Yeah.
people sitting in the board here in Sacramento, is that scene
Yeah.
from Zootopia. It's literally like three old ladies sitting behind like an old school green Macintosh computer, printing things out like manually. And it's like the most antiquated fucking system.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, man. So I like could not agree more. There just needs to be so much updating and change like across both systems. And I agree with you
Yeah.
on some kind of regulation. I mean, I know there's probably a lot of argument against what you're saying around regulating coaching. But I have worked with clients who there has been damage done by people who have just hung their sign
Yes.
and said, I am this or said, I am that. I think especially sometimes too in the realm of like, and it's not just this, I'm not calling this out, but I've had clients come to me who have worked with air quote coaches who pushed
Mm-hmm.
them to do certain psychedelic journeys, for example. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not qualified to kind of sit with them on the journey, help them integrate post journey, and actually have done far more damage than good. And now I'm almost left to like attempt to pick up pieces and put things together that should never have been broken apart, right? And so I think you're totally right. Like there has been some damage, and I think a lot of us are out there trying to figure out what does that look like for all of us to join hands and say, how do we make this as healing as possible and as best as possible for people
And accessible
Yeah.
as
and
possible.
accessible.
And
Yep.
accessible. And that is one of the reasons why I do love being able to get online and have a large social media following, because that way I can give things away for free, right? I can tier. Yes, working
Yep.
one-on-one with me is very expensive, but then you get the tier of, I do group coaching
Yep.
for way cheaper. Then I could do, you can get free stuff from me. Sometimes people will see my price and go, oh my gosh, how can you charge that much? I'm like, because I have 1,200 videos for free
Mhm.
online, because I do a podcast, because you can work with me at different tiers and still get some benefits. So access to mental health is my everything. I mean, that my whole purpose for this lifetime is to help champion that. And I'll just say, because I'm confrontational like that, whoever says that life coaching doesn't need to be regulated is wrong. Because
Hmm.
as a life coach, I watch the automatic trust that people have in me. I live in a small town, and I could go and tell everybody's business to everybody if I wanted, because there is no, I mean, I was taught when I went to coaching school to be ethical, and I follow all the same ethics as therapists, but that is my choice. I mean, anybody could go and tell any of your business. So anybody who
Ooh,
doesn't think that it needs to be regulated, and you can do major damage,
I agree.
getting in over your head. I'm very clear, and I work with my mentors who are coaches who used to be therapists about exactly knowing and taking classes on where are my boundaries, where is the safe place for me to do my work before I move them over into the work that needs to be done with a therapist. Where is the safe boundaries? And I mean, not everybody's doing that, and I would say not most are doing that. So
Agreed.
we
Thank
Mhm.
you.
absolutely need to be regulated. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's tough. And I really love what you started off with about talking about really talking to people about how to use discernment, how to really tap into like when something doesn't feel good to you or true, slow down, take your time before you jump into something someone else is telling you that doesn't resonate as truth for you. I was having this conversation this weekend with someone about how this is weird, but like with cult leaders, normally like 90 something percent of what cult leaders start off saying is like actually really brilliant and
Mm-hmm.
compelling. And that is
And
why
true.
they draw so many people, and true, why they draw like really intelligent people that,
Mhm.
they're like, how did this person get caught up in this? And
Yep.
it's just like this 10% that starts to trickle in once I've really built this relationship and this
Yep.
trust with this person, that everything takes a turn. And I just think it's important because no matter what, there will always be compelling people that are able to draw people in, even if it's not called a coach or a therapist or whatever. And I think so much of what Vanessa and I talk about a lot is how we're moving into a time where the inner authority needs to be where we move from first, versus feeling like some externalized power is able to tell us our truth. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my podcast I did this week was, are you allowing yourself to be a shithead? Of saying, okay, I'm a life coach and I make my living off of people doing, their inner work, but take breaks. Take breaks. Stop going to retreats sometimes. Turn off my podcast sometimes.
Totally.
Stop, buying the books because it's not the next book. People go, what book should I get on this? And I was like, well, maybe we should talk about it before you look to more books on this, more retreats on this. And I say that as somebody who's writing a book, does retreats, has a podcast. We also, I think, what you said leads really into the important thing of, I have 350,000 followers on social media. So at this point, when I get a new client, I often get them saying, oh my God, I watched all your videos. I'm so excited to be meeting you. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. It's very sweet, but that gets really dangerous. And then I just move them over into my cult, which is $4.99 a month. So, it works out perfect, but, yeah, the tiered system, and the more you pray, the higher up you get, it's a whole thing, but I have to be really careful to say, whoa, let's bring it down. That's like that one. But
I'm just thinking pyramid schemes. Really, like, are you selling Mary Kay? Like, that's kind of what I was going with.
Yes, 100%. Scientology is going through the whole thing. Absolutely. So I have to be really careful with when we have watched somebody on social media so much. We think they're a celebrity, right? Yes. And so when people come, they're so willing to listen to everything I say, versus when you just meet a new therapist and you're like, I don't know about this person, this rando, right? It's like, oh no, like, I know you. And so I have to really make sure that I'm always saying, this is my thought. This is my philosophy. This is my opinion. What do you feel like? What do you think for you? And that I'm not putting my thoughts and opinions on people. And this is something that I think we have a problem. I had a client come and said, oh, I went to this, I think she's sort of a life coach, but she's really famous online. And going, what's the background? What's the schooling? Because just because somebody performs really well and has cool things to say doesn't mean they're ready for your trauma. Doesn't mean they're ready to have that one-on-one discussion just because they've got great ideas and they can sit in their backyard and say them.
Speak on it, Rachelle.
Right? Totally. So that's the really scary place that we get to. And I've seen a lot of trauma around people going to people they see online. And I say that as somebody who's big online, right? Yeah. And so, I feel like I need to be the one talking about this because, I've got skin in the game. So let's do this. And that's another reason why I think these things need to be more regulated. And, at some point I would love to see Instagram and TikTok, now we have verified, but are you verified in this profession?
Yeah. Well, now it's not even verified, because now even on Instagram, you can pay to have a blue check. That's gone away.
Yep.
So nobody's verified anymore on any of the accounts, or platforms, which is that in and of itself. I'm like, oh, I get people all the time where I'm like, what's this blue check? And I'm like, oh, you paid for that. I can tell. Yeah. I'd love to switch gears for a second, Rachelle, and talk a little bit about neuro-linguistic programming, because you talk about that specifically on your site. And I think that, our listeners would probably benefit from understanding more what that is, because I don't know that Danae and I have actually ever talked about that. And I guess kind of like, what is it and how do you use it in your work? And I guess how would somebody know if that type of modality is something that they should look into or would be helpful to them?
Yeah. So neuro-linguistic program obviously is really fascinating, but I think the one that what you're talking about is the slightly different one I did on the reticular activating system in the back of your brain. I think it was that. So that's a little bit different. And so that one, that video just exploded overnight with like 8 million views, I think, because people were like, oh my God, you're finally explaining the thing that I thought, or explaining the science, the neuroscience behind manifestation. And it is this spot in the back of your brain that chooses what goes into your brain. So you have millions and millions of things coming into your brain all at once, sensations, thoughts, feelings, right? Everything that's happening in your body, and your brain has to triage that, what is coming into your brain. And so it chooses what you think about and what goes into your conscious brain based on what you tell it to. So for instance, I was walking with a friend who's an interior designer the other day through a hallway, and we're chatting, we get to the end of the hallway, and she's like, wasn't that a phenomenal blue in that hallway?
So it's
And
like
I was
me.
like, were we even in a hallway? Like, I didn't even know what we were doing. But because her brain is so tuned on color,
Mm.
when that information, so my brain brought in the information that we were in a blue hallway, and it said blue hallways mean nothing to us, so
Yeah.
I'm going to throw that information away. But for her, blue is a really important thing, so she thinks about it. It's that same sort of idea of, you think about getting a red car and now you see red cars everywhere, right? Because your brain goes, oh, red cars is important information now. And I'm somebody who loves, and I champion with the work that I do, I love the woo woo. Like, I'm all witch all the time, but I also want the
Yes.
science behind it.
Same girl,
Like, I
same.
want both, right? So I'm like, I am all crystals and witches and neuroscience, and let's put them together. And I believe that magic is just science we haven't discovered yet. That's a big, belief that I have. So I really loved about learning about the reticular activating system is it starts the second you wake up in the morning. It's like, all right, what do we want to think about? What do we want to be focusing on?
Yeah.
And most people start with, I'm tired. I feel like shit. Oh God, I got to go to work. This is the worst. I'm ugly. I'm fat, right? We start with bad things in the morning, and the brain doesn't care what you think about it. It has no judgment. So it just says, oh, okay, that's what we want to focus on. So you wake up and you're like, I'm so tired. It looks for ways all day long for you to be tired, to see other people be tired, for moments of being extra tired, or places where you could take a nap. It's focused on that all day. This is why when you think I'm fat, and then it feels like everybody is saying a little something, it's a dig on what you look like, because your brain is looking for it.
Yes.
Because that's what you focus on. And if you do it day after day after day, then eventually it's just your emotional home. It's just what it already knows. And it's sort of, I always say it's like a honey pot in the back of your brain, and all the information is coming in, and it's tainted with that. So if you are somebody who thinks negative thoughts all the time, then everything that's coming into your brain is tainted with that negativity or that fear, or with what you guys look at, trauma, right? So coming in with that hyperreactivity about everything, because it's what they've been focusing on. So the thing to do with the first thing in the morning is to decide what you want to think about, what you want to focus on for the day. Writing it down is really great. But that first thing, what do I want to focus on today? And then the more you can remind your brain, your reticular activating system, throughout the day, this is what I want to focus on, it will keep noticing that. So, if you're talking money, I want money in my life, your brain's going to start noticing the 4 cents on the floor, the dollar in your pocket, the ways you can make money, things like that. And so it's this sort of the science behind manifesting.
I love what you're saying so much, Rachelle, because I feel like what you're saying and what people like Dr. Joe Dispenza are saying from my perspective, are often another buffer to offer people a bridge to what are these universal laws and, law of attraction and these universal truths that I think sitting with people and realizing so much of the suffering is coming from the story I'm telling myself about what this is. And a lot of it's arguable. A lot of the way that I'm interpreting this is certainly could be true, but something else could be true. And one thought makes me feel really defeated. And then another thought makes me feel a little bit more empowered. But we have the ability to challenge the thoughts, to be in the inquiry. And I think a lot of times people experience those universal laws or law of attraction is like, no, you're just like denying reality. And it's like, no, it's actually making a conscious decision to be in relationship with what I'm focusing on, is what I hear you saying.
Yes. And the video I did, after that, like 2 videos after that, which was really important to put out there as well, is that this is not toxic positivity. You have to be so careful to not get into toxic positivity. I think it's an important thing for us to bring up, which is, yes, focusing on the positive is great, but you also need to process the negative when it comes. So yeah, focusing on, I'm going to think, positive thoughts about the situation, but oh my gosh, those feelings are coming up about my divorce, or about, I had a dog that passed away. And so I'm always dealing with that grief. And so toxic positivity is like, you know what? I'm not going to think about that grief and the sadness. I'm just going to, think about how wonderful my dog was. No. You have to, when I feel that pain come up, okay, this is my body saying, I need to grieve this. And I think wonderful positive things about my dog in this moment. I need to grieve this loss. So making sure that when those bad experiences come up or emotions, that we feel them and we process them. And then when that's fully processed, then I go back to thinking about the positive.
What do you think though about people, because we've had this conversation a couple times, and I have friends like this too, where they get stuck in that though. They get stuck in,
In which one?
In the negative. Like we actually had Danielle Laporte on a while ago, and we were talking about this concept of people being addicted to their trauma, right? Like actually coming from a place of like, it colors everything I do. It colors everything I say, and so it's like, what's that fine line? Or like, are you able to articulate what that fine line is of like allowing it to come up and feeling it in order to process, right? And integrate it. Because I always say it's like, that's how you move through something. It's not about getting over, air quotes. It's about moving through an integration. But then what's the fine line of like, okay, but now I feel like I'm just in that all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do when I have clients who are experiencing that, it's about tools. What tools? So I work with a client and say, which pause, when I first sat down with you guys, all of a sudden I thought, what if I'm being punked by my business partner who set this up with you guys? And this is actually going to be a therapy session to like work on my mom issues and not an interview at all.
I mean, we could.
We have your mom here.
Happily.
It's like, oh my God, this is so funny. But it's just like that thought came back of my mom in the background like, hey guys, let's talk about when she was 12. And so what I sit with clients who are going through something is, what are the tools you need to help process that? So for me, just staying with this dog example and grief, right? I love grief because we don't talk about it enough in our society. And so it's something I talk about a lot. My dog's been dead a year and a half, and I talk about it every time it comes up with people because we assume people should just get over things. I had a friend lost a child, and 3 years later she was crying about it, and someone's like, you're not over that yet?
Oh my God.
I will not never be over that, right?
No.
So we don't talk enough about grief. So I bring it up a lot, and because it does, it comes up a lot. And so I know when I sit and do my work, okay, when my grief comes up, I need to let myself cry. If I need a big cry, I go to my bathtub. My bathtub is like the place, and I love neuroscience. If you have a place where you need to experience emotion, you can make it a physical place so that your body can get right into it when it's there. So if I have somebody who's in extreme grief, they have a chair for grief, and you sit there and you cry it out as much as you need. When you get out of the chair, you're done. And if you have to go back to the chair, that's okay. But I'm going to experience it in the chair. So I go to the bathtub and I cry, or I journal about it, or I call my best friend who's super good about listening to stories about him. And those are my tools. And then when I've used my tools, then I move on. And I think the problem is we don't give people enough tools. So it's this sort of, I always say it's a cloud, right? It's this like huge amalgam of like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this. So it's easy to stay in it when you don't have tools to help you through it.
I love that.
Can we stay on your mom for just a second?
Yeah.
And not know what the relationship was between the two of you. I'm joking. But the first video that I found of yours that I was so struck by, actually, you were telling a story of when you had gone through a breakup, I believe in your early 20s, and you were about to move in with a girlfriend, and your brilliant mother suggested to you, live alone. Because if you live alone and don't move in with a girlfriend, you will always know that you can, and it will impact the choices that you make moving forward. And Rachelle like stopped me in my tracks when I saw that, because I just believe so strongly that we as women, especially, a lot of times are not conditioned to know how to do that. To like, I know I was in a marriage for many, many years because I was afraid of being alone and my ability to do it by myself. And I just thought, oh my God, her mother, the wisdom of telling you that at that actual like time in your life, though, I think was so important. And I'd love if you would share a little bit more about that.
And the great thing, my mother's not on social media, so she does love to, whenever I see her, to be like, how many millions of people have seen my video now?
It was a good one, Mom.
I'm like, Mom, it's like 4.5. And she'll be, you should put it up again and see if you get another million. Just because what I said was really good. So she loves this. I'm like, Mom, you said 2 good things in my whole life. Okay, get a handle on yourself. But No, and that has been for me a fundamental thing, especially in my 20s, because we sell women that in their 20s they're going to live with girlfriends, they're going to have a great time, then they're going to meet Prince Charming, and then they will be in that relationship for the rest of their life.
Yes.
And we sell that. And I, as somebody who is divorced, I have now lived alone for almost 10 years. I haven't been in a serious relationship in 7, 8 years. Not how I thought I would spend most of my 30s, but I'm so grateful that I have not settled for relationships that aren't right for me, that I have not allowed people to move in because of this thing my mom said. And, and she, says, you may get divorced, your husband may die, you may never get married. There are so many places. And that video has done so well and spoken to so many people because everybody says, oh my God, I wish my mom had said that. I wish I had known. And I have clients all the time, and I see people on social media, because a lot of the work I do, because I'm not married and I don't have children, a lot of what I do is championing those choices, because I feel like that's not talked about enough. We are still selling women that your value is to be a wife and mother. And that is a beautiful, valid choice. But there's another choice that's just as beautiful and special and valid.
If it's
and
your
so
choice.
if it's your choice, yes, if it's your choice, right? So I'm very careful that I hashtag child free, not childless. Like we've got some good words around this, that I champion this for the people that it's right for, and to never, downplay the people that struggle. When I was married, I struggled with pregnancy and not being able to get pregnant, and miscarriage and medically necessary abortion. And I've had to go through all these things. So I understand that path. And some of those people end up having children they really want, and some aren't able, and adoption isn't right for them. So come watch some of my videos and know that you can still have a beautiful, special life without that. And that video gets so many people who say, I wish my mother had said that to me, because I wouldn't have stayed in a marriage for 40 years. I wouldn't have, let men move in with me who are horrible people, or I can't leave my relationship because I'm so terrified to be alone. Or adult parents who move in with their adult children, or don't let their adult children leave because they don't want to be alone and they're divorced. So we have this horrible, we still in society are selling this horrible story about how awful it is to be alone or live alone. And it's really not. I leave in 2 weeks for my solo trip to Europe for 3 months. And, women all the time are like, what? Aren't you terrified? But you're just alone with yourself. I'm like, yeah, it's wonderful. All my friends with children are like, that's amazing. Actually, I'm coming with you. That sounds wonderful. But there's still so much stigma around, well, I couldn't do that. I couldn't be by myself. I think that's one of the things I really work on with clients is, looking at the monsters under our bed that make us afraid to look at ourselves and really see who we are. I'm always like, well, my clients know, I'm like, they're like, well, I don't know if I'm really, I don't know this thing, and I haven't looked at it. And I'm like, cool. And I need to get myself an actual headlamp, because I put on my fake headlamp for my clients. I'm like, well, let's go into your bed. Ooh, little cobwebs. Hey, bunnies. Ugh, this thing is vibrating. Okay, move that away. And, let's go and look at the things under your bed, because they're usually not as scary as you think you are. Even when they are really scary, they're still usually not as scary as we think they are. And the really scary ones we can get help with to make them less scary. But that's what's preventing us from seeing who we really are. And that's a shame, because then we can't be by ourselves. And especially as women, we need to teach that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love so much of what you're saying. I love thinking about it as, we have to confront these shadow elements of what is underneath the bed that we're afraid to look at, because if we're not, then it has power over us, right? But if we're in relationship to it, then we actually get to make a conscious choice. And then we are choosing this relationship because this is what I know that I want for my life, or this path of motherhood. I love that another video, you were like, motherhood is literally the one decision that you cannot take back or that you can't change. Every other decision you can course correct, make a U-turn, except for that one. And it's so real.
And that was a friend when I was deciding at the very, going, okay, am I going to do this? I'm getting older. I'm going to make the decision. Am I going to have children or not? And it was a friend of mine who has children. And she said that. She said, it is the one decision you can't take back. You can get out of prison, but you can't get out of being a parent. And I just realized that for me, I didn't want any, I'd been in bad relationships and so grateful to get out of them that I just said, I don't want to be in anything that I can't get out of.
Yeah.
And then I get the people.
Go ahead.
Then I get the pushback from people like, you'd never want to get out of being a mother. And that is simply not true.
That's
There are
just a lie.
millions and
That's
millions
just a
and millions
lie.
of women out there that are so unhappy, love their children, but so unhappy to be mothers. And when I became a life coach, I thought, well, women who have children will never want to work with me because I don't have children. I don't have that experience, even though, as you guys know, as therapists, we don't have the experiences that our clients go through. It doesn't mean we can't work with them. But I thought, no mothers are going to work with me. Mothers desperately wanted to work with me, and I worked exclusively almost with mothers for a while because they felt like they could say to me how much they hated being a mom,
Yes.
and they couldn't say that to other moms. And that also needs to change in society.
I think Danae and I have talked about that so often that it's like, it almost makes me laugh because we're so open about being like, this has nothing to do with my love for my child. Like I
Right.
can separate out those thoughts and realities. Like I love my child and I don't love the process of parenting. Right. And they are different. And also we have to be able to ask why. Like if we don't even admit that, then we can't ask the question of why, which then leads us to society and our lack of support for parenting. And like, then you get down this rabbit hole. But I think because and I think it's constructed this way for a reason. If we keep that shame there where we can't ever actually be honest and ask those questions, then we'll never get to the deeper root of what needs to change so that that isn't my reality. Right. And so let's just keep everybody quiet and in a place of shame so that that conversation never gets had. Right. It's even the conversation around making a choice to be a parent or making a choice to be in a partnership. As long as we continue to make women believe that it's scary to be alone and that they're less than to be alone, then they're not even going to question it because that fear is going to overtake any of their kind of cognitive functioning around like, but who is messaging is that? Is that my belief? Is that their belief? We don't even go there.
Yeah. I love talking about, I talk about this often, the whole concept of a crazy cat lady. And I love that because that is so beautifully the patriarchy.
That's what they come with in the comments. You're just a crazy cat lady living alone. I'm like, yes, I am. And I love it. Thank you
so much. Oh my God, bring on the cats. But I just love that the patriarchy that says, how wrong that is. And I thought, and it dawned on me one day, I thought, wow, these are women since the beginning of time that said, I can find love, compassion, the ability to nurture, to have unconditional love in my life without having a man.
That's right.
And that is so terrifying to the patriarchy that we had to call them crazy cat ladies. And I just was like, wow, no wonder people didn't want to get divorced or not marry. I mean, you were a spinster at like 23 originally. If you weren't married, I mean, these were all these just horrific things that we've sold women, and we continue to sell women. So, and so many women will come to me and say, God, I wish that I had known there was an option to not have children or to not be married. And so, they'll look at my life and say, God, I wish I had known. And so I say, well, that's what we need to do. We need to get women younger and say, hey, here's all the options on how you can live your life. None is better than the other, but know you have all these options.
And by the way, hope is not lost if you did make that choice. Like there are still ways that we can fix this system so that people who, let's say, have children can still go on solo European trips as they should be able to, right? Because being a mother should not cut off your ability to do the things that fill you up and have you living a passionate life. But we have also, as a society, set it up so that becoming a mother then cuts you off from ever having a life, right?
Absolutely.
And that is bullshit. And that, again, that's systemic.
Yes. And it is that thing that we're subliminally taught by society that you should give everything to your children. Yeah. Right. So that's like, okay, so you become a mother and then it's like, no, you have to give everything. And if you have anything left over, you should give it to your partner. Right. So then we lose, that just a whole women alone in a house raising children. Like that was never, ever supposed to be like that. And so really also getting together more support in community. And I mean, every time I have a friend say something like, oh, have you seen how Cheryl raises her kids? And I always say, and I love that for her.
Yeah,
I love that for her. Like I cut them off immediately, and I love that.
We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
We are not shaming each other on it. So I will catch people on anytime someone's like, "Oh, and did you see?" And I have to catch myself sometimes because sometimes I'm a horrible judgmental bitch too. So I have to catch myself when I'm like, "Oh, did you see?" And I love that for her, Rachelle, and I love that for her. I love.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. You like literally you're our people, Rochelle, because I think we often speak to the fact that we as women are some of the most fierce defenders of patriarchy. And we do it when we
Mhm.
attack women for not making the choices that we would make or shaming our bodies or like,
Or making the choice that we wish we had made, but we're too scared to
yeah,
admit that we're actually a little jealous of them, and that's why we're actually judging and attacking them.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing that I always do is I compliment women when I think a nice thing about how they look. A stranger on the street, I always tell them because I one time was across the street from a woman. She was just staring at me, and I went to all the bad places of like, how fat do I look? How ugly do I look? How stupid do I look? I don't have the right color. I mean, I went to like all the dark places. And then as we crossed the street, she goes, I love your jumper. And I
Yeah.
just like, it made me cry because I just thought how grateful I was that she took the time to say that, because I would have spent the rest of my day ripping myself apart because of how that woman looked at me. And it turned out she was just staring at like, I love your jumper.
My 3-year-old little Piscean angel of a daughter is
Oh,
like, her mission in life is to make sure every woman she sees knows how much she likes whatever component. Like,
I mean, this is a Pisces thing because
I
I'm a
love.
Pisces.
Are you? It's well, it's something like visual, fashion, like
Fashion.
colors, design. But she's like, I love your shoes, I love your purse. Like random people on the street, I love your hair, I love your lipstick. I mean, it's so specific, and I laugh every time because every time she does it, these women will be like, oh, and they're so like, oh, thank you, and she's 3, and they're so like flattered. It's so funny.
And it's a dopamine hit, right? Like
Yeah.
because I do this all the time, and like I'll have partners, I'll be dating somebody and he'll be like, oh my God, do you say this to like everybody? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm incredibly selfish. And they're like, what? I'm like, I love the dopamine hit I get by seeing how excited they are. There's a
Yeah.
woman, an older woman walking in with her daughter at prom, what happened recently. And they were walking into the restaurant. And the mother was dressed beautifully with the father, and the daughter looked gorgeous. And we walked by, and I said to the mother, because she had a beautiful dress, and I said, you look beautiful. And she said,
Mm.
she does, doesn't she? And I said, no, I said, you look beautiful. And
Mm.
she started to cry.
Mm.
And she was like, do you know, right in front of her husband, she said, do you know how long it's been since somebody has told me that I look beautiful? Because, right, once you have children, right, it's all about them, the attention
Yeah.
on them. Like, this is her special day. You know what? You dressed up, you look beautiful, you put the effort in as well, and you're not to be
Yeah.
forgotten.
Mm.
Sister, I salute you for the work you are doing in the world. You are just such a
And
gift.
I'm
It's
also a
making me
shithead
emotional.
too,
I mean,
right? Like,
same,
but I,
same.
I mean, right? Like, I'm also terrible. I also sit in my underwear and watch Vanderpump Rules every week and yell at the screen, and I'm like, you idiots, right? As I'm dripping chocolate on my belly. So,
Listen,
I
we
can
are
sometimes be like,
multi-faceted human beings.
Oh my
Okay?
gosh.
Make
literally,
space.
my
Can't
podcast
with the
about,
Vanderpump
about
Rules.
don't even, if we can do an entire episode on Vanderpump Rules, you guys, I'm here for it. I am in it. Like, I've never been in anything. It's a
Oh
whole
my
emotional
God.
thing going on. I'm in therapy, you guys. It's fine. Don't worry. She'll handle this. But we don't have to go there. But I say on my episode of like, allow your shithead is, I often will get on after a whole day of being with my clients and being my best self, right? Which I love working with my clients, but I'm my best self when I'm with my
Totally.
clients. And then, I leave, and then, there's just shitheadness that is like built up right
Just
throughout
gotta
the
get
day.
out.
And I get out with my girlfriends, right? And I'm like, that person cut me out, and this bitch, you know what she said? And then inevitably there'll be somebody I don't know at the table. I'm sure this happens to you guys as therapists. And we'll be talking, and I'll say something about clients, and they'll be like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm a life coach. Called 3 women a cunt. Like, in 4 minutes, I don't have any water yet. Chips aren't even eaten. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a life coach. Like, oh Jesus. But human beings.
See, we exist today.
I love it. And
kindred
like
spirits,
real
Rochelle.
talk, I was sad about something like a week ago, and Vanessa and I were sitting by the pool. I don't even remember what you said, but something like catty. And I was like, God,
Yes.
babe, I love you so much. I needed that right now.
I was like, I'm not going to go to like the spiritual higher self place. Actually, this is what's going to be really.
She's
We
like,
need to hear
no,
this.
man, that's bullshit.
Yeah. One of my best friends, who's this like renowned therapist, top of her class in what she does. And I'll get on the phone with her, and she'll be like, okay. But do you need like good me, or do you need like, that bitch sucks? I was like, oh, I need that bitch sucks. Like, I need the ride or die.
Yeah.
Like, well, she's clearly just a bad person.
Fuck yeah.
When really it's probably my childhood trauma, coming up and rearing its ugly head. But I just push those mother wounds right down, and I'm fine.
And that people is what is called friendship. Yes.
That's right.
Multifaceted. Listen.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, Rachelle, I feel like we could keep you forever. You might have to come back on and talk to us some
Yes.
more about
Love
Vanderpump
it.
Rules. But,
Oh God, Scandival. Oh my God. Yeah.
I
I'm
love
here
the
for it.
humor. Oh my gosh, I'm crying.
Because I feel like
Okay.
mental health doesn't always have to be serious, right?
100%.
Laughter is so much of the best medicine.
It's
So,
just as
yeah.
healing, right? If not more.
Yeah. I love when my clients, and I do this very sparingly, but I love when my clients are like in the moment of like, they're like, not necessarily in the trauma, but in their pain. I just go, wow, I've never heard of anybody with a worse life than you. And they're like, oh my God. And we both just like crack up laughing because it's just like sometimes you just have to be like, I am the pit of despair. And yep, I have the worst life. Yep. My life coach told me, I've never seen anything like this. Okay. And we just have to laugh about it.
I agree.
That's right. Okay. Well, Rachelle, we have a lightning round of questions that we ask all our guests.
Oh, yay.
The first one is, who have been your greatest teachers, mentors, or people that have impacted your journey up to this point?
Ooh, I would say Oprah, in one single thing that she said, which is, I decided not to be a mother because what people give to their children, I choose to give to the world.
Girl.
Oof.
That has set me on the course. I know, it brings tears to my eyes. That has set me on the course that I'm on. And I would say people that I think are doing it wrong actually inspire me, right? Sometimes my own anger at how people are doing it. So I don't want to mention those people, but that anger fuels me to get up and say, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. I'm doing it different and louder.
Same. No one's ever articulated it like that, but thank you for articulating it like that. Because I've always struggled to say, like, what is it about that like not sucks me in, but sometimes I'm like, no, but this anger is so important because it is what gets me fired up to then go out and do it differently or go out and try to change the world or the system, right? It's not necessarily through all like the love and light feelings. For me, a lot of times it is through that like rage, like, fuck this.
Yeah, that feminine rage is really important. I think that's what changes the world, right?
Great.
So, yeah, I love mine. Yeah.
Okay. So the second question is around this concept of flow. So I guess really like, what is flow for you? How do you understand that concept? What does it show up as for you, right? Like, what is flow?
Yeah. So flow, because I'm so much into the somatics, the work of being able to find things in your body. So I worked really hard on trusting my intuition. And when I just know something and then it goes right, where did I feel that in my body? And so my knowing feels like because I love the witchy selenite, like a little selenite rod, for those of you who don't know, just like a clear crystal rod down the center of my body of heat and strength. And when I feel that, I know I'm in my flow, I'm in my truth, and it doesn't have to be anybody else's truth because everybody else's truth is wrong but mine. It doesn't have to be anybody else's truth, but this is my truth, and I will die on that hill. That's how I know.
Love it. And what breaks your heart?
What breaks my heart, what breaks my heart apart is people believing that they're alone, alone in what they're feeling, alone in the world, and alone in their suffering. That's what gets me to get up every morning. Yeah.
Yes.
And when I don't want to get on social media and I don't want to do the thing, I'm like, but if I can hit that one person that said, I thought I was alone until you said that thing.
Yes. Love that. Yeah. And then the final question, what is your favorite food?
Oh, my favorite food. That is a great question. It's, you may have seen it. It's this like granular, white stuff. I think they call it sugar. And I'm not particular about it in most forms, in its true nature form, in its, Dorito laced form, in its, malt form, any form it comes in. I'm not choosy. I'm just grateful.
All the sugar all the time.
All the sugar, all the things. And then I love that I get to then wear that sugar for years to come. And so it stays with me. And that's really beautiful.
It's like a cozy blanket.
My ass is mostly the cake from my divorce that I bought myself. I'm like, yeah, you are still here with me. Yeah, we're doing this together.
Keeping you warm.
Taking this ass to Europe. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can sit on a bench so much longer than all my skinny friends. They're like, oh, isn't it hurting your butt? And I'm like, it will in 4 hours. I'll get back to you.
Oh my gosh.
I love.
Well, if it wasn't solidified before, the sugar did it. Rochelle, you are officially our people. I'm going to speak for me and say we are obsessed with you. And I know you travel a lot. If you ever come to LA, you have to let us buy you dinner because I feel
Yes,
like we would have
absolutely.
Crying.
so
Lived
much
there for
fun.
8 years.
Crying.
So yes,
Yeah.
I'll have to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you so much, ladies. I'd love to come back.
truly.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and the work you're doing in the world. I just feel like you're having such a beautiful impact and so grateful I
Great.
found you.
Yay. Thank you. Me
Yeah.
too. Excellent.
And Rachelle, tell our people where they can find you. We'll put it in the show notes, but definitely just give it to him here too.
Yeah. RachelleIndra.com. Nice and easy, but also on TikTok and Instagram, Coach Rachelle Indra. It's a good way
Awesome.
to get started and jump off from there. And then everything, of course, is in the link tree.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank
Thanks,
you, Rochelle.
Rachelle.
Thank you. Appreciate it.